Hello everyone, Floppy Waffles 69 here guys, and welcome back to the channel. Today I figured we would do something that we haven't done on this channel for a while, which is actually go back all the way to tier 5 and do a premium ship analysis on a ship that I think kind of gets the cold shoulder in this game and kind of lives in the shadow of her sister ship, which is just so strong. But let me tell you, this ship, for the coal price, as you can obtain this ship in the armory for coal, is actually very, very good and worth it. This being the tier 5 premium battleship for the, I guess, what do you call this? The Pan Americans, the Rio de Janeiro. Yes, this battleship entered the game alongside with the HMS Agincourt, but both ships, even though they share the same hull, can actually not play more differently. And the reason you probably don't know about this ship, again, is like I said, it lives in the shadow of its older sister, which is that HMS Agincourt. Now, the Agincourt is known for its insane secondary battery. Not the best gunnery on the ship, but you have so many guns that it really makes up for that lack of consistency with the main battery. Just because you're slinging so much shit down range, you're almost guaranteed to hit. That, coupled with the typical Royal Navy HE penetration and hard-hitting HE that is found on all Royal Navy ships, creates a very interesting package that a lot of players gravitate towards if they want to have kind of a fun play, secondary brawler down at tier 5. So again, this ship kind of gets pushed to the wayside. Now, if you do, or if you are in the market for a fun tier 5 ship, let's say higher tier is just bringing you down a lot, you're getting frustrated at either the matchmaker, CVs, subs, whatever it may be, whatever your reason is, the Rio de Janeiro, I believe, is honestly a very, very good choice for the coal price that you're going to be getting. Plus, all in all, it's just a fun ship and a good package. The big difference here between the Rio de Janeiro and the Agincourt is the Agincourt, as it leans in more towards its secondary battery, the Rio de Janeiro leans more into its main armament. And again, I will get more into that here in just a little bit, but I wanted to just set the precedence and the stage for what these two ships are and what you're going to be getting when you play either of the two ships or play against either of the two ships. Now again, I don't think the HMS Agincourt needs much of an introduction. I think a lot of players already are familiar with what that ship can do if you stray too close to it. Its secondary battery will eat you alive. And I've already made a full in-depth analysis of the Agincourt, which is a ship that I absolutely love and adore. If you are interested in that, the link will be in the description below. And you can go ahead and find that on my channel as well. It's about a year old. But again, that's not the star of today's video. The star of today's video is the Rio de Janeiro. And like I do with all these ship analysis, I will talk a little bit about her. Obviously, we're not doing a port analysis, but I'll make sure to go ahead and show the armor scheme first, talk a little about her tips, or talk a little bit about her statistics, go over some tips and tricks that I found really make the ship work, and go ahead and finish off with some gameplay and my final thoughts of this ship and why I believe this is a very, very fun ship to pick up and play when you just want to kind of turn your brain off and go get pretty damn good results in this particular ship. So without further ado, guys, let's go in and start this ship analysis. Alrighty guys, so here we are in port looking at the Rio de Janeiro, and as we scroll over to the armor layout screen, you can see that this is pretty much similar to that of HMS Agincourt. As you already know, they do share the same hull, and all the corresponding statistics do follow in both of the corresponding ships, meaning that they are pretty much damn identical. Now, as you know, here we have a 19 millimeter, I guess, nose. We have a 19 millimeter ass. We do have a deck of 38 millimeters, which is quite nice at this tier. But again, I want to point your attention to this right here, this armor belt. Now, you do see this is kind of a little raised section. We do call this a shell catcher. This is really prevalent on battleships at the kind of dreadnought era-esque style of ships. Remember, this counts as hull armor, so this will be, you'll be eating penetrations if you are not careful, especially in the pre-kited position. If stray AP shells happen to land here, you'll actually take hull damage, which does not count towards superstructure hits. Kind of interesting, right? Kind of sucks too, if I'm being honest with you. If we go over to the I guess Citadel plating armor scheme, you can see that our Citadel is indeed waterline. It is fairly narrow, just stretching out the lengths of that first turret and the last turret as well. This ship can get Citadeled, so you have to be careful with your positioning and angling, especially when you get in tight to enemy battleships. Just be careful with that. And then no real spaced armor to talk about here, though. If we do scroll over to the outplating, we have the armor belt of 229 millimeters, and we go ahead and strip certain layers away. You can see that that comes out to a 25 millimeter torpedo bulkhead. So again, around 250 millimeters of effective armor. And again, there might be some spaced armor in there with the torpedo bulges, as you can see here. So sometimes shells will get lost within this hull and not score Citadel ribbons and or penetration hits, as it's only going to be penetrating the outer layers of the armor. All in all, the whole of the Rio de Janeiro and the HMS Agincourt is relatively tanky. I really don't see it being that big of a problem. Another thing that is worth noting on the Rio de Janeiro's armor scheme is these, I guess, what is this, the third and fourth turrets. They are actually protected slightly by the superstructure here, which is quite nice, which can translate to them having higher survivability and not getting knocked out as frequently as the other turrets that are just on the deck and mounted and have no cover on them. Very nice. And again, some of them do turn 360 degrees. I believe turret 3, 4, 5, and 6 do actually turn forward. As you can see here, the fifth turret is already facing forward, and so is the number 3 turret. So they do actually rotate 360. So it is allowing you to keep more main battery guns on the target as you swivel from side to side, rather than other ships that have to turn a whole 180 degrees in order to keep those turrets to bear. So all in all, guys, the Rio de Janeiro's overall armor scheme, very, very nice. So like I've already previously mentioned in this video, this ship will run you 35,000 doubloons, and again, you can utilize your 25% off coal coupon if you so choose to bring the price down even further on this particular ship. Now, I for one think because the price of the Rio de Janeiro is so low, I really don't think you need to be spending your coal coupon, ship coupon that is, on this particular ship. I think you can accumulate the amount of coal that you need to basically in a month in order to pick this ship up, which is why I actually think it's actually kind of a steal when it comes to these lower tiered coal ships. I would say anything around probably the Yubari and up is probably relatively worth it, unless you absolutely love your tier 3 little cruisers and, you know, battleships fights, right? Because there is like what the HMS Dreadnought, I believe, is a ship. Again, I will cover all these ships later on this channel, and right now I started with the Rio de Janeiro. So again, 35,000 coal for the ship, really not that big deal. You can get that within a month or even sooner, depending on certain, you know, events and mission chains that are available. And if you are lucky enough to get super containers with that 12,500 coal, not hard to accumulate the amount of coal in order to get this particular ship. Now, again, when we start this review, or as we started this review, the armor layout, like we've already talked about, is not too terrible on this ship. It has parts that can be easily penetrated by large caliber HE or even heavy cruiser HE. Light cruiser HE is going to rely more on DPM to set fires, but on all, the package here is relatively good and relatively sturdy. Again, nothing phenomenal compared to like what is the Koenig or you know, anything like that that's really strong in regards of its its armor values, but this ship definitely is not squishy or weak, to say the least. Okay, this is not like the what was that? What is the ship? The Orion, even though that's a tier 4, but like the Royal Navy typical, right, battleships. Looking at this ship, going into some more statistics about her, I already mentioned that her general statistics about her max speed, her acceleration, her rudder shift are all matching that of the HMS Agincourt. You have a 22 knot maximum speed, your rudder shift time matches it at 13.4 seconds, and your turning circle radius is around 670 meters for the turning circle radius. So really not that bad. I think it handles relatively well. Looking at the HP pool, you are indeed matching the Agincourt again at 48,400. Again, your repair percentage and Citadel repair is matching that of 10%, which is normal. 50% repair, normal. Torpedo protection is, though, at a measly 15%, which isn't really that good if you compare it to other battleships at its tier. Now, the big difference between the two is the secondary battery on the Agincourt and the main battery on the Rio de Janeiro. So if we go over some general statistics about the Rio's main battery, we could conclude this thing is definitely more gun focused, coming in at 16.1 kilometer range with a 31-second reload. Her Sigma value is 1.7. And her overall, her AP DPM and her HE DPM are just considerably higher than that of HMS Agincourt. The one big difference here is the armor-piercing shells, and I really want to talk about these AP shells. Now, again, you do have the 305 millimeter guns. You do have the same 7x2 305 millimeter guns on this particular ship. Maximum AP shell damage is 8,100, and again the range was what is 16.1 or 16.5. Pretty nice overall. You can overmatch 21 millimeters of effective armor, and your ricochet angles are standard at 45-60. The one big thing about the big difference between the AP on the Agincourt and the AP on the Rio is actually the AP on the Rio is coming in at a fuse time of 0.015 seconds rather than the standardized AP fuse time on the Agincourt at 0.033. What this is basically saying is that this is very in line with Royal Navy AP when it comes to the Conqueror and the St. Vincent. And if you are familiar with those ships, that basically means there needs to be less armor penetrated in order for the AP shell to fuse and detonate within the ship. This is absolutely lethal towards lightly armored targets. Something like cruisers, for example, can absolutely get schwacked and dev struck off the face of the earth here off the map if they're not, I guess what's the word I'm looking for, if they're not aware of where the ship is at and if it has AP loaded rather than high explosive. This thing can definitely take advantage and punish broadsides, especially at this tier. How many times have we played battleships and we shot at a broadside and cruiser to get nothing but overpens? Well, look no further. The Rio de Janeiro, where that still can happen, has a far less of a chance of that happening to her rather than something like the Agincourt. Again, range is going to play a factor in whether or not the shells are going to overpen. And again, your penetration matches that of the Agincourt because they are basically the same gun, but they do shoot a slightly different AP shell is what I'm trying to say. And they just basically tweak the value, and the fuse time is the really big, the only big difference between the two ships. Now, if we go into the high explosive on the ship, the high explosive of this ship, which is again probably going to be your main bread and butter on this vessel, is going to be awesome. This is like typical Royal Navy HE being slung in the ship, where your damage is higher than that of the Agincourt. You have 5,200 rather than 4,400. Your penetration does match that of HMS Agincourt at 76 millimeters. Your fire chance is a whole whopping 1% higher, so you do in turn generate more fires per minute at 8.7 fires a minute rather than 7.2 fires a minute. This HE, as it has 76 millimeters of effective penetration, is enough to Citadel a lot of tier 4 and tier 5 cruisers. So again, I don't understand why you would switch to armor piercing all that often, even though there are going to be some examples of when to do that, especially in this game you see on the background footage here behind you. Basically, my big advice here with the Rio, guys, is just stick with HE. It's such an easy ammunition type. Plus, when you're shooting cruisers, not only can you knock out their engine, knock out their steering gears, knock out their guns, but you can also Citadel them in return. The HE is so strong on this ship that I would say you're pretty much slinging HE 70 to 80% of the time effectively, because you know you're not going to overpen with HE, and you're going to be basically guaranteed damage and knocking out modules on the respective ships, and let alone on top of that setting fires. Again, the secondaries I really don't want to touch too much on because you already know that the Agincourt secondaries are absolutely cracked, and that's what that ship is known for. Just understand that the Rio de Janeiro is pretty much neutered, not even in half, but more so. I'd say about, it has like a quarter of the ability that that the Agincourt has with its secondaries. The secondary drop off is absolutely astounding, or it's shocking. They really have upped the Agincourt secondaries from a reload time of 2.7 on its smaller caliber to 4 seconds on its larger caliber secondaries. And to put that in perspective, even the smaller secondaries on the which are what, the 76 millimeters on the Rio, are reloading in 5 seconds, and your 152s are reloading in 10 seconds. So there's a big secondary DPM drop off. As you see, the Agincourt's rocking 452,000, whereas the Rio's only rocking 184,800. Huge difference. This is not a secondary brawler. I would highly suggest you staying around that 12 to 15 kilometer range with this ship. Probably actually more around the 11 to 13 kilometer range, if I'm being honest, because we are in lower tiers. But again, it's all going to depend on the matchmaker and the deployment of the enemy team. Hallelujah, you're a battleship, so that means you have some of the strongest ASW in the game. You do have an airstrike on the ship going out to 8 kilometers, though you only drop 1 depth charge from the sky. Again, that kind of sucks. You have to make sure you're pinpoint accurate on where that sub is going. But again, at least you have a rebuttal to submarines, unlike having to sail, some cruisers have to sail over that particular submarine to drop their ASW or depth charges, which puts them in a very vulnerable situation. And last but not least, we come to the consumable loadout of the ship. And again, very standard here, guys. You have your damage control party in slot 1, and you have your standard repair party in slot 2, and that is it. There is no spotter plane. There is no nothing on this ship. But there is one thing we need to talk about when it comes to the Rio de Janeiro. And again, this was present during my Agincourt review, which is you have literally 0, big fat goose egg, 0 AA on this ship. And that can be the only real reason I don't see the Rio de Janeiro play. Sure, the Agincourt doesn't have it either, but the Agincourt has a massive upside when it comes to its secondary battery, which a lot of people could say, well, even if I get nuked by Kiers, I can still have some fun with my secondaries. The Rio de Janeiro doesn't have the secondaries, so it only relies on its main battery. So I can see why players would maybe not gravitate towards playing this thing with 0 frickin' AA, right? I can understand how frustrating that can be. But here, this is my counter to that. It's not like battleships anyways at this tier, with maybe the exception of 1, maybe 2 BBs, have, they have phenomenal AA, right? They have pretty much weak AA anyways. So it's like, having the ability not to shoot down any planes, is it really that big of a weakness to not justify playing the ship? I don't know. Maybe 1 or 2 planes shot down after 4 consecutive strikes. You're like, it's worth it. But for me, it's like, I'm going to get struck anyways. And as you see in the battle behind you, I'm in a very vulnerable, bad position. Whereas this CV wanted me dead. He's going to kill me regardless. It's one of those things that's like, I don't know. I really don't know. It's a question I ask, and it comes down to you guys whether or not you think it is worth it. But yeah, guys, that is basically the Rio de Janeiro in a nutshell, from her statistics to her overall play style, for her armor scheme, what she's bringing to the table. I, for one, find her a very, very fun overall package, and I think it's something that, if you're looking for a ship at, low tier, that's, hey, like, I just want to have some fun, then why not do it, right? Why not play? I mean, unless you're saving up your coal for higher tier ships, which again, if you don't have a lot of the tier 8s, tier 9s, maybe even the tier 10s, yeah, I understand that. But if you have the vast majority of them, and you're not one of those players that, hey, I don't want the Immelman, I don't want the Malta for coal, like, I'm just sitting on a shit ton of coal, I already bought the defense, so like, what do I want to do? Maybe start looking at lower tier ships and going back and playing them, because I think there's definitely some fun to be had. Again, though, there are a handful of ships that in this particular matchmaker you have to be careful of. Again, I would list them up on the screen here, but I'm just going to tell them to you in general. And again, you should probably know what they are by now if you are at tier 5. The ships that I would be the most aware of are the Fujin, the Kamikaze, the Giulio Cesare, And even I'd throw the Ohotnik in there as well too. Those are basically the 4 ships that I would be like making sure that I am aware when I'm loading into the battle screen to see if they're sharing the same game as me. They're just too strong, and they come from an era where there's some liability issues, and some, I don't want to get into all the details of why those ships can't be nerfed. Again, if you are new to the game, then maybe you don't know. If you are an older player and you know why, then feel free to share it down in the comments below. But just understand that there's some liability issues when it comes to the wording of how premium ships were sold back in the day, so they really can't adjust those statistics too much, or if at all. So again, you're pretty much stuck with those ships dominating lower tier, which is, I think, a bit of a problem, because those ships have dominated for so long, and I think it's actually driven a lot of players to either A, skip these tiers entirely and never go back and playing them because those ships are plaguing the game down here at lower tiers, or people just flat out quit the game because of the frustration of these particular ships. But then again, if I'm using that argument for those ships, then I can see the other counter argument, which is like, well, Floppy, CVs exist. Do CVs not do the same thing? Do submarines not do the same thing? Absolutely. Like I see that as a problem too. I think a lot of players, it's one of those things that you either hate subs and aircraft carriers or you love them. There's really no middle ground, unless you're me, because my middle ground is it's never been about the damage that either of these ships can do. It's been about the small, subtle things about these particular ships that actually get me frustrated, such as like carriers would be the spotting. But again, I understand it's essential, but the spotting is what usually gets me frustrated, because I don't know how many times I've gotten half my HP shaved off because of plane spotting. And the homing torpedoes on submarines, and the constant pinks really frustrate me at times, and it puts a lot of strain on the damage control party. But again, it's one of those get good situations. I'm not going to delve into whether or not I think it's balanced or not. I'm just going to go into and I'm just trying to give examples of like how I can see people, what they're saying as like a counter argument. Like, I see both sides, and I just want to acknowledge that maybe my viewership, you guys see both sides as well. Maybe you don't. Maybe you're really strong on this side, maybe you're really strong on that side, and I just want to basically acknowledge that I understand and I see both sides. So my goal here is, when it comes to this, from what I've seen after how many YouTubers have come out either for or against it, like, I'm just staying neutral. Like, there's really no point to choosing a side, because I don't want to alienate anybody. That's not my goal here. I don't think it's fair to anyone, because at the end of the day, if you like it and it's in the game, then I guess you have 100% ability to play it. So if you like it, why not play it, right? And just like if I don't like it, for example, then I have 100% of the ability to hate it and never play it, right? It's my choice, it's my decision, just like it is yours, which comes down to the overall premise of the channel, which is, it's your opinion, it's you, do what you want, right? Going back to the Rio, sorry for that little side tangent here. I just want to make sure I made some things crystal clear. We are finding ourselves in a bad situation here in the background footage, which is we're getting, close into an Agincourt. So it allows you and shows you basically why you don't want to do this. But again, once the Agincourt gets a little too brazen, a little too cocky, a little too overconfident that they think they're going to melt you with your secondaries, this is where you can load that armor piercing, and you're really going to catch a lot of battleships off guard. I don't think the first salvo is the salvo I get them. I think the second salvo is the salvo I get them. Your AP salvo is heavy. If you land, and how many guns do you have on this thing? Like, you have so many guns. What is it? 7 times 2? That's insane, right? 7 times 2 guns. It really can translate to a lot of flipping damage on the receiving end. And again, at these ranges of like, what is this, 3.64 kilometers? Like, how can you miss, theoretically speaking, right? And again, that's when the AP is really going to shine. And again, the short fused AP, it's not the best, not the most ideal in this situation, but I'm just going to go for chunking shots, and I'm going to absolutely freaking nuke him for 22,000 damage. Like, and that basically turned the tide of the conflict in my favor at that point. Like, yes, his secondaries are still burning me. I have my damage control party. I have a heal coming up, so I have some survivability safety net in the back. But he just is so keen on utilizing his secondaries that it's basically jeopardizing the whole battle in my favor, which again, I'm all for, because look at that juices luscious broadside I'm going to be able to take full advantage of right here. Don't always assume that the Rio de Janeiro has HE loaded. Anyways, now we move into the actual battle replay with the Rio de Janeiro, and I will actually go ahead and flash up my commander build and my corresponding upgrades on this particular ship. Now, again, for the commander build, very self-explanatory, very simple. It's all damage mitigation here. I'm not for when it comes to the Rio de Janeiro, believing that the min-maxing of my faster firing guns or anything like that, like I don't need to do that, you know, with the heavy AP skill or whatever, and then the Furious, like that's just not my opinion. I think the standard safe opinion here is going to be just taking your standard cookie cutter damage mitigation on the Rio de Janeiro. Now, one thing I didn't mention is that you can put the legendary, what is it, Labosa commander on this particular ship, which again, because he shares the Pan American flag, yeah, you can go ahead and do that and bounce him. So if you have your 21-point Libertad commander and you want to say, hey, you know what I want to do, or Valparaiso commander, hey, you know what I want to do, I want to go ahead and bounce him down to tier 5, you can theoretically do that. But again, the playstyle is going to be a little bit different. If the Rio de Janeiro played a lot like the Agincourt in regards of the secondary battery, then yeah, I could see an argument for saying, wow, that could be absolutely lethal. But again, I'm just looking at it more from like, if you want a 21-point commander on the ship right out the gates, if you have one and you don't want to retrain a 10-point commander and get him all the way up to 21, because at tier 5 it's going to take you way longer and so many more games to do so, then I recommend just going ahead and bouncing a commander down here to tier 5 on your Rio. Again, that's not what I do. I happen to have a commander at this ship, and it's actually an 18-point commander because I've played this ship a lot. This ship actually is a lot of fun for me, and I get fairly good results in her, and that's again why I decided to make this review on her, because I feel like it's a ship that not a lot of people know about. Because I think not a lot of people play tier 5, and I think a lot of people just play the Agincourt instead if they have it. But if you don't have the Agincourt, I think this is a phenomenal ship to play, personally, okay? I think you're going to get really good results in her. If it's not with their HE, then certainly switching and dabbing that number 2 key for the AP is quite good as well. Now, one thing that I highly recommend you do not do in your Rio de Janeiro, which again, doing it in the background here, so I apologize, is being super aggressive, okay? And the reason why is because in order to get all your guns to bear, you do have to show a decent amount of broadside, and your hull, the way I talked about it, like, it's not a terrible hull, it's not squishy by any means, but compared to a lot of other battleships, like the Bayern, like the Koenig, like the Italian BB, like a lot of these BBs too, at this Dreadnought era style, they are cloaked. I mean, absolutely cloaked in red armor, meaning like the armor thickness is pretty damn high because it's a Dreadnought. This really isn't the case, so I guess if you want to call it squishy, it's squishy-er, but I wouldn't go ahead and call it squishy, if that makes sense. I know, I'm probably confusing you guys. I'm sorry. Just understand that your armor is good, but it's not as reliable as some heavier armored battleships. Let's just put it like that, okay? But I still think there's that fine line of being way too passive and then being, you know, uber aggressive. Like, you need to find that middle ground, and it comes down to making sure you're surrounded and pushing with your allies, and making sure that you are not getting so zoned in on a single target, making sure you see the enemy fleet for what it is and how many ships are there, reading the deployment, and then making your maneuver according to what you see. It's all about information, guys. It's a battle for information. The more information you have, it allows you to make a more logistical decision based upon what you see, is what the premise is. And I see a lot of players, they just sail right in there and they push right in and they die so relatively quickly. I don't want that. I don't want that for any of you guys, okay? Also, there's an example of the 76mm penetration of the high explosive going to work for us. We end up scoring a Citadel on the La Argentina, getting incapacitation, and setting 2 fires. Now, again, he damage controls it right away, as he should. But then again, that's what this HE does, guys. This HE is lethal when it comes to basically cruisers because they don't have that much armor. So it actually does way more to them, knocking things out with that super high, like that high explosive, which again is a typical trait of Royal Navy. So you're basically getting Royal Navy-ish style of gunnery on this ship down at tier 5 for the Pan American nation, right? And again, that's probably the right thing to do because this is essentially HMS Agincourt, which is Royal Navy in its own right. So it's nice that they went ahead and carried that on over to this nation and the ship, because it stayed with it, right? Another thing about the Rio, again, there's not too much to talk about because it is a tier 5, so like I'm not going to be here and talking too much strategy with you, but one thing that that I really like about the Rio 2 is that you only have a 31-second reload compared to like that of the Agincourt that was at 35, 36, and again, that's compensating for the insane secondary battery that you have. I really don't find it that much of a nuisance, and again, with as amount of guns you have, which I believe was 14 guns on this ship, it is quite nice that it is only 31 seconds because that's a lot of shells I'm pumping out down range at a reasonable amount of time. 2 salvos, just over a minute, not terrible at all. And again, with Adrenaline Rush taking a little bit of damage, you can see that I have my reload down to 27 seconds, which again is very, very nice. The HE spamming potential on this ship is quite good. I've already talked about that from the penetration, from the fire standpoint. If you love and you're an avid fan of the Royal Navy battleship play style, you're going to feel right at home with the Rio de Janeiro. But also, that being said, you dab the 2 key, especially at these lower tiers, because you have the shorter fused armor piercing on the battleship at 0.0515 seconds instead of the standard 0.033, you are going to be able to dab that 2 key and do a lot more damage to these cruiser players if you so choose not to just stick with the HE. If you stick with the HE, as you can see here, because he's so lightly armored, I could still absolutely devastate cruisers like the Galicia here. But if you want to go ahead and dab the 2 key, again, there is a time and a place depending on the cruiser, you will more often than not get less overpens than you would with something like the Agincourt or any of your other standardized tier 5 battleships at this tier, which is quite nice. I like that. I like that a lot. So all in all, guys, the package here is quite strong. So going into my final thoughts about this particular ship, like I've kind of already stated, from the gunnery, from the HE, from the armor piercing, from the fire setting potential, from the overall hull, from the salvo weight, from the handling, like this is a great ship that doesn't get enough love because she just lives in the shadow of her older sister, which is HMS Agincourt. And I understand that, and I think it just goes to show you that the community as a whole appreciates secondary battleships more and the love of the brawl. But if, let's say, you don't have HMS Agincourt and you want to still, pay patronage to this ship, this mighty battleship, the Rio de Janeiro is an excellent choice that I think you can get lost in and play a lot of games in. And again, for a price of 35,000 gold, guys, that's like less than a month to accumulate if you play this game even remotely, like maybe like 4 or 5 battles a day, like if that. Like, this ship is so fun and so strong. And again, I want to say so strong, maybe that's not the right word, but it can be with the HE spamming potential. This ship is a blast to play, guys. Anyways, thank you so much for tuning in on this video. I will leave you on the post-battle screen. Stay tuned for more, guys. Make sure to like and subscribe, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Have a good rest of your day, captains, and peace out.